Just getting silent for a moment while it all links together.
No problem.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to Action Coach Birmingham and another of our Lunch and Learn webinars here at 12 o'clock on Monday the 14th. The month is flying by, but it's great that we've got Paul Painter from Painter Creative with us today. Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Stephen. Thank you.
Good. It's great to have you with us. And today we're going to talk all things imagery, aren't we? How to promote your business through having a great image. So it's great that we've got you and all your expertise, your many years of experience, Paul, in the industry to help us along with that question. But before we get into that, for those who are listening to us perhaps for the first time, you may well be on LinkedIn, you may be on Facebook or logged into the Zoom platform directly. Whichever way you're listening to us, it's great to have you with us. Please do test Paul's mettle, ask him anything you want, send the questions in, and we'll do our best between Paul and myself to get the answers to you. If for any reason we can't answer your question or we don't spot your question online, I do guarantee that we will reach out to you afterwards and make direct contact with you. So please do put the questions in this feed. Please do share the feed on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and engage with us. It'd be great to hear from you this lunch. But no, back to you, Paul. It's great to have you with us. We've not had a professional photographer on our Lunch and Learn before, so it's a first for us. So I'm really looking forward to hearing all about you and your business. So tell us a bit about Paul Painter Photography, Paul.
Okay. Oh gosh. Well, epic journey as they always are. I started working for myself back in, I think it was 2004. Before that, I'd worked for a photography company where we were shooting a lot of sort of weddings, family portraits, that kind of thing. That's where I started. That's where I sort of got my stripes, if you like. And then left because I wanted to follow a more commercial world. It took me a few years to really sort of break into that world, but I wanted to be working with businesses, helping them promote themselves through great imagery, really. So yeah, that's what I've been pretty much doing since 2004. So it's been it's led to some very interesting projects. I ended up working. I photographed the whole rebuilding of New Street Station here in Birmingham.
Yes, I spotted some of those on your website. Actually, I was looking on your website earlier on, which we'll pull up some surprises in a moment. But I saw the Grand Central photos on there.
Yeah, which was a remarkable project to work on, as you can imagine. And
yes, our connection there, Paul, is I worked for the construction company that oversaw the design of New Street, as along with Curzon Street. So there's a connection. I worked with the architect to do all the design. So no, it's a great, very, very ambitious design, isn't it?
Yeah, it was fantastic. And what was amazing was just seeing sort of the day in, day out work that was going on behind the scenes, that all you would see as a sort of a member of the public was these sort of big barriers up that, and there's probably a lot of banging going on behind. And it was just fascinating seeing just the level of, that they had to go to create this, well, I think it's quite magnificent train station now, but and the challenges they faced, sort of how, for example, just how to get rid of the rubble, which was a big project that we photographed deep underground through all the Victorian tunnels beneath the station, just because of access purposes. And that was, it led to some fascinating experiences, I've got to say. So I think that's one of the highlights for sure.
Just getting back to, you said you started, I don't want to make an assumption here because I can make a fool of me, but you started with weddings and family portraits. Is that where most photographers start commercially? They start and then sort of decide what specialism to get into, or?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. Certainly in the Birmingham area where I began, I have family here, I lived here. It's sort of, that you start where you are, don't you, really? And the opportunity to sort of assist or help commercial photographers up here was quite limited. Because there just aren't the volume as there are, say, for example, in London or Manchester. My philosophy was at the very beginning was just to get in any way I could, because once you're in an industry, you can start to move around within it. You start to make friends, you make connections. Yeah. And so I sort of took, the opportunities that came my way, which would be different for somebody else. Mine just happened to be a guy who ran a wedding company, and he said, come and carry the bags for a bit, which is what I did. And then sort of, eventually he put a camera in my hand and it all kind of went from there. That's how I broke in. But again, I've met many people who, they started working as a junior photographer on a newspaper, for example. That's not a road that really happens much these days, but or they were just, they're assisting a photographer on magazine shoots or commercial advertising shoots, that kind of thing, which, yeah. So no, I don't think it's a normal route, but it's.
You said in 2004, Paul, you took the plunge and decided to go self-employed.
Yes.
What sort of prompted that decision rather than the security of working with somebody else and a regular wage coming in?
Certainly not the sensible half of my brain, and that's for sure. But
as I'm sure you'll hear me say before, I've worked with many business owners, and there's usually one of several things. It's either redundancy, or it's somebody wanting more control in the industry, or somebody wanting more choice and freedom, and there's usually something that triggers that step. For many people, a very sensible and very worthwhile step.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, certainly. I mean, to walk away from the security of a job is tricky for anybody. I'd already done it because I'd worked in I would call a normal job, an office job, for years before that. Before I made the switch over to photography, and so I'd already sort of made that one jump once. So to therefore do it a couple of years after I'd begun again wasn't such a big emotional challenge, so we say, because I coped with that disruption once and coped pretty well.
Yeah.
But the two things that really drove me were that I wanted to go in a different direction with my photography. Weddings are great, and they're a fantastic business to be involved in from a creative point of view, as are sort of portraits, family portraits, or that style of portrait. You can do you can be very, very creative in those worlds. But I've always been fascinated by business, industry, construction, that kind of type of work, the corporate world. And that's the direction I wanted to push. And I was never going to get that opportunity working for the company I did. It just wasn't their business. And secondly, I value my own freedom enormously, the freedom to be able to choose what I do on a day-to-day basis. I don't cope well with the you have to appear busy type mentality that you get in many places. And, I don't cope with that kind of rubbish very well. So I needed to be my own boss, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of working for myself for many years. That's
I'm sure the last 12
more
months
important than the money. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure the last 12 months for your industry, like any industry, has really presented its challenges as well as its opportunities.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, it did. I mean, the interesting thing going into it was, as you could sort of see this approaching, I don't think any of us really knew how long it would go on for or anything, but the bit of strength I took was that we coped with the 2008-9 recession, which actually hit us sort of 2009-10. It hurt. I mean, that recession hurt a lot, caused us an awful lot of heartache, a lot of issues, but we survived and came out the other side a lot stronger because I put my foot down, in terms of my marketing and my push. Now, at first, we didn't get anywhere because obviously everyone's just sort of, hunkering down and battening down the hatches. But then because we kept going with that, we came out of it very well. So I figured the same thing would possibly happen with this. No matter how, even it lasted a couple of months, how everyone's going to sort of shut down initially, but then eventually it'll open up. And that was my experience, was that, so actually, funny enough, we came out of it. We've come out of this sort of the last year, sort of from about March onwards this year, we've been incredibly busy again. But we just stayed in touch with everybody. That's what I did, and just, just kept knocking on doors, kept networking, kept talking to people, being in touch. Didn't use it as an excuse not to do those things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. Many of all of my clients, I've been saying, and many contacts and networking groups I'm in, I've been saying the one thing we want to do is make sure we come out of this with the same contacts, the same number of clients who went into, and the most important thing is to keep communicating, to keep telling people we're there. Now, one of the great ways you communicate with your clients, Paul, is through your images. And I just want to treat people who are listening and watching to us this lunchtime, as a number, and I would say to anybody, if you've got 10 minutes spare longer, go and look at Paul's website. There is some fantastic imagery on there. You just seem to bring the workplace to life in one image, Paul. Just I love it. I
Thank you.
absolutely love it. I'll tell you, see, I did GCSE photography many years ago, and have a very amateurish passion for photography. So I love dabbling with the camera, but I'm probably one of the, like many, who've not had my SLR out for goodness me over
Yeah.
a year now, because I've got used to using a phone, and I really need to get back
Yeah.
to using my my decent camera equipment. But what I want to ask Paul, there's a couple there, and I would say to anybody, do go onto Paul's website there, paulpainter.co.uk, and have a look at the full range of images that Paul has got on there. But Paul, I mean, these images are really striking in terms of angles and lighting, etc. And we've just been talking before we started that we could have a whole masterclass, full day probably, on what makes a good image.
Yeah,
that is what your skill and your talent. But for the amateur, are there one or two things that people might want to consider in terms of what might make a good image?
I think the biggest thing I see when I sort of see people who've taken pictures on their phones, or and they're trying to promote things, is that the things they're photographing seem so far away. Make them bigger in the frame is a real key. If you've got a focal point on it, that's the bit that you really want people to talk about or see. Step closer. Usually several yards closer. I mean, that sounds like an obvious thing to say, but it makes such a difference, because then people can see what it is you're actually shooting. Stephen, I'm just going to shut my window because somebody's just started drilling outside my house.
That's absolutely fine. Just while Paul's doing that, we're with Paul Painter from Painter Creative. If you're listening to us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, please do ask any questions. We're learning all about what makes a great image and how to use imagery to promote your business today. Paul, you were just saying about moving closer. I mean, I've got a typical, well, you can't see it because of my background, but I've got a phone that's got one of these new wide angle lenses, and I guess that's encouraging us all to do these wide shots. But I didn't realize actually until I'd taken a couple of shots and moved on and was back from my day out, that actually it distorts quite a lot, doesn't it? The image we take.
It does. And I think this is where it's I remember my very first boss, Russell, where I had all these great ideas when I first started as a professional in this game, and he was the one thing he said to me is, a little knowledge is actually a very, very dangerous thing, because you think you're doing something great because you saw it on one occasion work very well, but does it really work? Does it actually tell the story you're trying to tell? Does it do the thing that you're trying to do? And it can you can trip yourself up. It's astonishingly easy, but it's like any career, like any job. The more you delve into it, the deeper you go, the more you understand, and the more you realize how little you do know. And I think it's the same with photography, or any image making world.
It reminded me, Paul, of a couple of years ago, I saw a professional photographer tilt his camera slightly on an angle, and I thought that looks great. And I went through a phase of about 12 months of tilting my camera, and every photo I went to, I sort of tilted my camera by sort of 10 degrees, and some of the shots looked okay, but some of them looked pretty awful when I got back. And you missed that one opportunity. Whereas I realized afterwards, I could go back and tilt the photo later. It's
you can do. The funny thing is, actually, that's a really interesting thing. One of my very early mentors, I saw him do a talk at one of the big photo shows here in the UK. Approached him afterwards and said, look, I'd love to come and buy you a coffee or dinner or whatever, just if you've got an hour just to talk. Anyway, I went to see him at his studio, and we were talking, and I had started that thing of tilting the camera, and he just looked me square in the eye and was like, stop it. Can you shoot it well straight, basically? And that lesson has stuck with me a lot throughout my entire career. So if you have fun enough, the pictures that you're looking at on the screen there, they're not tilted very much at all. And it was like, and that was another big step, was how to create these images without having to employ it used to be called the Dutch tilt. Funnily enough, I have no idea why. I'm sure there's a good reason.
But a lot of your images, Paul, is the clarity of the angles without tilting the camera. Just jumps out. When you particularly say the ones on the top row, for example. I think it's the composition, which is obviously the skill you've got, and before you even pick up the camera, it's having the eye for what will fill that lens, I guess, isn't it?
And I think that's one of the big things. I think one of the bits of advice I'd say to people, if you're looking to take some pictures for your own business and you're going to use your phone or the camera you have, is really think about what it is you're going to do before you do it, because often it's in that planning stage that that's where that's where you can make some real adjustments. Like, for example, the gentleman on the left there with the high vis on, I knew I was going into that environment because I'd been there to see what it was like. And I figured, where the sun would be at a particular time of day, what lighting I would need to really make him stand out from the background. And what would make these metal pipes, scaffolding as it is, really pop, and that's where your techniques come in. But I'd already found the spots where we were going to do where I could really, bring those techniques to play. And it's those sort of things where, you're trying to, like, for example, the man in the suit there, before that shot was taken, I'd sent him a whole list of things of kind of what to wear, what not to wear, what to avoid. Things like, don't wear pinstripes because they give off a very different feel to a photograph. For example, you're appealing to a very different audience.
Depending on the clothing. Don't change. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay. Sorry, sorry, I misheard you. So it's all these sort of little things. Now pinstripe on a shirt is fine, but on a suit, it gives a very different message. And we were talking about like the background of the shot. What's in the background? Do we remove the waste machine to the photograph left or not, or do we leave it in? These little things, and these were all the things we considered. It wasn't that it didn't just get left there. I just thought it looked a bit empty without it, so we left it. Now, was I right? Was I wrong? I don't know. Some people agree, some people won't. That's but the point is that these things, you're considering them before you set the shot up and before I've got the gentleman sit there and take the shot. So my full focus is on getting the best expression out of him rather than have all the other things been taken into consideration, if you see what I mean.
We're talking about filling the screen. We're talking about the background. Well, guess what you're saying is planning, taking your time to plan what you want and what you want to get out of the image.
Definitely. Yeah. It's totally what are you trying to say is really is actually so important, because in the current era, there is so much digital noise out there. There are however many billions of pictures being taken every day and put onto Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. How do you take something? How do you make your brand, if we're talking particularly about business, how do you stand out? You know what I mean? How do you
Absolutely.
How do you get that
the question I had
across?
for you is how do you stand out? Over the last 12 months, I've seen so many of my clients and other businesses turn to digital.
Yeah.
They've turned to digital marketing, digital promotions. They've jumped onto not just one, but maybe 5 different social media platforms. They've revamped their website or set up a new website. And how do you stand out in a world that is very crowded digitally?
It's an interesting point, and it's more nuanced than just have a nice picture, of course. But I think the thing is you've got to take pictures that appeal to your audience. So if I'm shooting for an architect, or a construction company, for example, there's no point appealing to people who like pictures of flowers and landscapes, because that's not their audience. That's not what they're interested in. So it's not, for example, about a pretty picture. Very often I'll take pictures that are quite ugly, for want of a better word, but they appeal to the people who like that thing, no matter what it is, and I think it's bear in mind that people are genuinely interested, or there are a lot of people genuinely interested in what you do. And it's good to bear that in mind. It doesn't matter whether you're a lawyer or an accountant, or you build conservatories or replace windows or whatever it is. There are people who care about that, and therefore you are shooting. Certainly, I'm shooting for a very specific reason. It's to appeal to a particular type of person, and I think that is one of the real keys. It isn't about necessarily just about volume. I've got X number of Instagram followers, etc. Well, you can have 10,000 Instagram followers, but if none of them buy what you do, pointless. If that's the purpose of your Instagram blog. For example,
we've got a comment from Sarah who's on Facebook just saying the importance of researching your industry, so knowing what your competitors are doing, what images they're using, how you can differentiate. It's a great point.
Precisely. Sarah said something exactly the right word there, which is differentiate. I mean, again, one of the biggest mistakes I hear when we're initially commissioned by people to take some pictures, one of the most interesting things I hear is, oh, we'd like to look just like this. And very often they'll bring up a website of a direct competitor. And I'm just sort of thinking, why do you want to look exactly like the people you're competing against? Because surely then you're just kind of merging together into one nair. And how are you separating yourselves, and I think that is a critical error if you're using imagery to market yourself. You want to look visually different. I mean, sure, you can't go, for example, if you're an accountancy firm, you can't suddenly go, well, everyone else wears suits and ties or whatever, we're all going to wear Hawaiian shirts. I mean, no, that's clearly not going to work. You're just going to look unprofessional. But it's the way in which those photographs are taken, perhaps, maybe where, for example, you've got like everyone else is, or most people are using the white background portrait, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But why not do something different? Why not show, if you've got lovely offices, show off the lovely offices? You know what I mean? There's use an environmental portrait to promote yourselves. Maybe add in, and then within there you can tell stories because people can see things in the background of things that you do. You can show off your professionalism. You can show off how much pride you take in your, in how your offices look, and that again reflects on, because you take pride in your offices and where you are, perhaps you take a lot more pride in your work. You can tell these little stories. I mean, not everyone's going to get those messages, of course, but some people will.
Absolutely. And Paul, you've obviously photographed a huge range of diverse organizations and different industries from the photos I've seen on your website and from what I know of you. But you must come across some images over your years that you think, oh goodness me, I wouldn't have done that, or I would have done that differently. And obviously I don't need to name names, but what are some of the biggest challenges or mistakes you've seen with businesses using images?
Well, I mean, the one we just talked about, which is they try and look like their competitors. That's the biggest mistake. I mean, that is the ultimate mistake. But also, the big one I see is that they haven't thought through how they're going to use them. So it's like, if you've got a website where you've got like thin borders, thin sort of, long, thin pictures, you need photographs that will fit in those sections, if you saw what I mean. If
Absolutely.
if you've got a portrait section, so you're showing your staff members for whatever reason, if the pictures are square, then that we need to know that beforehand. And very often suddenly deciding after that to suddenly sort of take a portrait that's taken to fit a standard sort of 35mm standard digital type shot isn't going to work. You're suddenly going to end up with some quite awkward looking pictures. So these things, those are sort of a couple of the basic mistakes I see.
I think one of my biggest bugbears personally, Paul, is where somebody's taken either a great or a reasonable quality photo and then stretched it into a position on a page, on a document, and distorted it completely. So it's a personal bugbear of mine. I just think
and the other thing, actually, one of the really important things, in all seriousness, is that often, in that push to get content out there, people show an awful lot of things that they really shouldn't show. And I think this is critical. I mean, one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given was only ever show your very, very best work. Just because I like something doesn't mean to say it's my best work. It doesn't mean to say that it's actually going to do me any favors. And, that's obviously something that I've, with the experience over time, you begin to sort of, you get better at that. But again, if you've taken something that, I don't know, like we said earlier, you're saying, we are conscientious, we're professional. And then in the background of the shot is a whole load of boxes stored looking a bit rubbish. It's a visual clue. Now, again, some people won't spot it. No, some people won't care, but some people will spot it and some people will care. And it hurts your reputation because you said we're professional, yet the photograph you just showed is everything but. And this is
the bottom left photograph there, the woman with the scaffolding poles, I think they are. That image immediately strikes me as a scaffolding company that is organized, on the ball, You know, they know what they're doing just by the fact that the way it's stored and laid out behind the lady.
Exactly. It's not a mess.
Yeah,
And that's important. That was very important for that company, for that division of that company anyway, because they're trying to show off, we do know what we're doing. And again, the hint was also the fact that they're holding iPads or electronic devices, is that it's not just all about paperwork and that kind of thing. It's sort of a nod to the fact that they're pushing their technology forward to be ahead of the game, and it's, again, some people have got that, some people won't, but
it gives a nod to health and safety as well, doesn't it, in the business?
Absolutely. Again, they are wearing everything that they should be in that environment.
High vis, hard hats, etc.
Yeah, even down to the gloves they're wearing, and the glasses that they're wearing, which is something that, as over the years, funnily enough, we've actually had to remove some pictures over time because health and safety laws have changed. So, to stay current and to show that we know what we're doing, some of those pictures have had to come down.
I got a question from Dan, actually, just on that point. He's just saying, how can we avoid pictures dating too quickly? Have any thoughts on that, Paul? It takes me back to my early days. Now, not many people know this. They're going to university. And I remember taking photos of houses in the days when you have to then send the film off the 35mm to the developer to get it back and stick them onto the sheet of paper. But, taking photos of houses for sale just before Christmas and then waiting, the Christmas trees in the window.
Yes.
And then you have to suddenly take the photos again in January because the Christmas trees come down. But I mean, I say that slightly, but are there any ways in which, generally we can avoid photos? If you're investing a lot in a photographer, how can we avoid them being dating too quickly?
There are ways of doing it, but the things you can't change are fashion changes. So the way people wear a shirt or a tie or the colours, they do change over time. Haircuts, that kind of thing. Right now, for a while, beards have been very much a thing. And sometimes, and you can tell eras by looking at pictures. Pretty much, my best advice would be you'd be looking. You wouldn't want to push a picture more than 5 years. There are exceptions to the rule, and there are pictures on my website that are more than 5 years old. I'll defy you to find out which ones they are. But that's because they've been taken deliberately to not age too much. So we've kept things very simple, like the clothing will be very simple, or but they will age. I mean, give it another few years, you will be able to tell that was not a recent shot because colors change over time. So it's
I love a challenge. Just going down the gauntlet. I'll be going on your website later and send you an email with ones I think are 5 years older. I'm sure I won't be able to identify them because your images are so good. But talking about being a great photographer you are, Paul, when hiring a photographer, why should I, what should I be looking for? Why don't I just take the one on the first page of Google? What is it we're looking for if we were going to hire a professional photographer?
Okay. Firstly, it's, I think, number one, photographers are great at using pictures. I mean, just like any other business, they're not necessarily the best at making sure that their SEO or whatever else is the greatest. Therefore, to find the one that suits your business, you may have to dig a bit. And I would certainly advise you do that. So, for example, if you were buying a conservatory or an extension to your house, you wouldn't just Google, I want an extension to my house, top 3, that'll do. You would check. You would check you see the work they've done. You would study what they've done. You might ask for referrals. You might ask for testimonials, for example, or certainly look at the sort of clients that they've had in the past, if it's a business relationship rather than a private relationship. So I'd certainly do that, but also make sure they have an understanding of the sector you're in. So, if you want a wedding photograph done, you don't ring me. Yes, I used to do it. I used to do it 15 odd years ago, but I haven't really photographed weddings for the last 15 years. So, there are changes in the way that industry works. I'm also not set up for it, if you saw what I mean. So, producing an album, all that kind of thing, making sure everyone can see the pictures so they can choose if they want some themselves.
I would agree, but when I looked at your website, the first thing that jumped out at me was just how much construction industry images there are. Now, I'm sure you do other things, but
yes,
if I was in the construction industry, you'd be the go-to person just looking at your website. So
Exactly.
a great point there. Great point. So see what you can see. What can you take from the website first of all?
Yeah, exactly. For example, again, if you are a fashion designer, of which there are plenty here in the Midlands, again, I'm not your guy. I'm really not. There are some fantastic fashion photographers here in the Midlands. They're the people you talk to because they get it. They understand the market. They follow the trends. You know what I mean? So, like for example, in the corporate world, I'm following those trends. In the construction and industrial markets, I'm following those trends. I'm seeing what. For example, earlier this year, we started to spot a real trend towards more environmental pictures across all industry, because it's because of the targets that are being set for industry, that sort of thing. And we started getting numbers of inquiries. We started seeing those pictures a lot more. I started seeing a lot of people tweeting pictures of that, the nice green grass with the one big tree in it. And I'm like, for God's sake, will you stop publishing that picture? You all look the same. This is where you can differentiate. Talk about something you are actually doing. Show the picture of the thing that you're actually doing. That's how you get your messages across. So again, you want to talk to a specialist, somebody who really knows your sector, or sort of, for example, if you're talking about commercial or corporate work, somebody who photographs that and they understand, I mean, and the reason being, let me give you a classic example. It's something I alluded to earlier about the gentleman with the suit and whether he should wear pinstripes or not. Okay, so just to sort of demonstrate a sort of depth of knowledge here.
Lost Paul for a second there. Hopefully he'll be back with us. He's just
Am I
paused.
back?
He was just about to tell us about the man with the pinstripe suit there and some
Can you hear me, Stephen?
That particular image. Just while.
Oh. Stephen, hello. Stephen? Hello?
Hi, Paul. I don't know if you can hear me. Not quite sure what's happened there. I'm sorry that I believe. Hi there, Alex. I hope you're. Thank you for letting me know. Hoping Paul will be able to rejoin us. It's Steve Truman here for Action Coaching Birmingham. We were doing a webinar all about great imagery, and we just unfortunately lost Paul for a moment there. I'm not quite sure what happened. I think it might have been a crash on Zoom itself, as we both got kicked out. We are still here. We're just waiting to see if Paul can rejoin us. Whilst we're doing that, I'll just share the screen. Paul was just going to be talking to us a bit more about some of the great ways in which we can promote our business through using the right images. So I'll just wait for Paul to. There he is. Paul's back with us. There we are, Paul. I don't know.
Hi, sorry about that.
Zoom must have crashed something there. I do apologise.
That's all right. Was it both of us, or was it just me?
No, I think we both got kicked out for some reason. I'm not quite sure what happened. But anyway, it was good that we've got you back. You were just about to tell me about the man in the pinstripe or not in the pinstripe suit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So just what I wanted to do is just sort of demonstrate sort of like, so why you need to talk to somebody who really understands your market, or, again, or certainly the wider aspect of your market. So it might be business or corporate world or construction as a whole. There are, and again, because you can really drill down and there are micro specialisms within each of these sectors. So for example, let's take a business portrait. Okay. Should you wear a tie or should you not wear a tie? It's a basic question. But again, there are trends in that, for example. But again, you can go into it. So the pinstripe suit, should you wear a pinstripe suit? Well, it's not a yes or a no answer. If you deal primarily with, shall I say, upper class, high net worth individuals, possibly yes, because that will appeal to that market segment. If you're trying to appeal to a much wider market, should you wear pinstripes? Absolutely not, because actually it will, from a psychological point of view, put people off. And then you start talking about colors, and so what are the standard colors you should wear? Now we all know that most corporate people would wear, for example, a dark navy suit or a gray suit. Sometimes people wear black, but again, why is that? Where does the knowledge go? For example, again, this is where you start to talk about specialist knowledge. Like Ronald Reagan, going back many years, actually made the brown suit quite popular for a while, but it's not today. And there are reasons you can really deep dive into if you wish.
No, you just
my point being,
flashbacks, Paul, to my cream suit many years ago.
Exactly, but you would not, in a photograph that you're promoting a business with, there are certain things you steer clear of. Again, fashionable a few years ago was wearing the same color tie as the shirt you were wearing, which again, in GQ or Esquire magazine, whatever, looks great. It doesn't look great on a corporate website. It just looks odd, and makes you look like you're going on a night out rather than you're going to deal with someone's probate issue.
Yes, and there's been a phase for the paisley, the patterned shirts, hasn't there? Again,
exactly.
It's getting the right. Yes, it is, and I guess I don't guess. I know, Paul. This is where the expertise for a photographer who knows the industry, who knows what works on camera and what doesn't work on camera, really comes in. And I think we're sort of partly answering my next question, Paul, which is why wouldn't I just go to? I'm trying to think of some of the big names out there, Shutterstock, etc. Why wouldn't I go to them and just buy the license for an image that works for my website? What's the advantage of having bespoke photos?
Oh, I'm going to turn that question slightly and surprise you with the answer and say occasionally you should. Occasionally you should, and there are good reasons to use it. For example, there are times when there is a photograph there that is extremely expensive to replicate, and the business case doesn't justify replicating it or trying to achieve it. For example, there are occasions when stock is a very useful thing to use, and I wouldn't say don't use it just because I deal with commission photography, but the reasons to not use it throughout your website are because, well, there are several reasons really. Number one, and probably the most obvious one to most people is that lots of other people are using those same shots. There are a number of websites out there now where you can download to use legally free images, but they're limited. So you're not going to dive down onto page 100 to find a picture. There usually isn't the depth anyway of good images there. So what you end up seeing is the same picture on lots and lots and lots of people's websites. And if you're telling me that you're authentic, you pride yourselves on your diligence, etc., well, for those people who put a lot of energy or a lot of stock in to how things look, and that's not everybody. Some people are very much more words than they are images, but there's a lot of us who care about images, out there. You're lying, and that is not a good thing to be. Your trustworthiness is being challenged by the fact because you're using images that clearly aren't yours. You've just thought because it looks pretty. The other thing, the reason why I would certainly advise against it across all of your website, I think as little fillers, for example, you're talking about, I don't know, a project that's over in, I don't know, a different part of the world, and you want to get a nice photograph of that. Yeah, great. Illustrate it with a stock image. But the reason why you wouldn't do a lot of it as well is because a lot of search will operate through images. So behind an image, there's a lot of what's called metadata, which you can change. You can put keywords in there. It's a fantastic way of increasing your SEO. At your SEO agency or your design agency can talk to you about this, where you can fill in certain keywords, because a lot of people do search by image. They don't search by the normal standard Google work. There's a large percentage of people out there who do that. So your imagery has it has a great chance of not only boosting your current SEO on the normal website, but it also will show high on image searches. But again, also Google and websites like that, they prioritize unique things. So, whether that's a sentence or it's a picture. And again, so it will help you with your marketing. The main reason, though, those are just sort of almost sidelines compared. The main reason why I would say don't use stock too much is because you can't tell your story. And that's the beauty of having your own photographs taken. You can't, you can tell the story the way you want to tell it. Commercial photography is not about, we're not journalists. We're trying to tell the truth that you want to tell. We're trying to show the side of your business that you want to show. We're trying to help you promote yourselves. Whereas a generic shot doesn't go into that depth. It doesn't show the bits that you in your business can deal with. And I think, whether that's a testimonial shot, whether it's a case study of a client, whether it's, whether it's just showing one of your processes, for example, in a visual way, there's so many stories you can tell that are authentic to you, and that can't be copied by your
competitors. I love that sentence, tell your story. I mean, that for me just sums it up. And one of the other big areas that I'm often picking up on people's websites, clients' websites as well, Paul, is the easy trap, particularly for small businesses, is to think they've seen a nice image online, I'll use that. And of course, it's all the digital copyright, licensing, etc., etc. So it's, we haven't got time to go into that in depth today, but it's something to really be aware of, isn't it, in terms of, building a website. Social media is another great one. I'll use that and I'll post it on social media. But if you don't have the rights to it and you're representing your business, it can be.
Don't do it. It's theft. I know people go, oh, well, it's digital and I never really took it off anybody. I hear that argument. I hear it. Great. That doesn't change the law. The law is, if you take an image and use it without permission, it's theft. It's as simple as that. And they can pursue you for financial, they can go after you and you need to pay them money, and you will lose if you take them to court.
Absolutely. It's the same as
because the law's not on your side.
Or perjury, not perjury. What's the word? Where you're copying people's text as well. It's all the same.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, same laws, copyright.
Yeah. So exactly. In terms of, I've just mentioned social media there, and people use a lot of image on social media these days. They say that a post with an image or a video, in terms of reactions, likes, shares, will have such better engagement and increased traffic. But in terms of the images we use, is there a difference between the images you might want to use on social media versus your own website, Paul?
Yeah, I think, again, this is sort of industry, well, certainly sector specific to an extent. But I would say that, yes, the images are different, the ones you use on your, for example, Instagram account. What we started to notice was, and it's something we've actually done with a lot of companies, where we produce two sets of images now, where you have one where they're a bit more heavily filtered, for example, so they look a bit more, so we say, spectacular, which go on social media. But if you use those same images and put them in a corporate brochure, it just wouldn't fit. It wouldn't look right. It would be clearly overly manipulated, and that in a sort of a paper traditional brochure, that it just looks wrong. So yeah, there is a difference, and again, it's a judgment call. There isn't a one size fits all answer to that. But if you're heavily, if you're a big user of Instagram and you are heavily editing those pictures with those filters, I would strongly suggest you don't use those on other elements of your marketing. And I mean, things like your website as well. If you're using really heavily edited pictures, it doesn't necessarily fit with some of the others you're using. And even if it does, I would suggest that, if you're showing a product, for example, it's generally accepted on places like Instagram that you're using filters. Everyone knows you are. But on a purchasing website, for example, it's going to look wrong. And I would strongly suggest you don't do that. I mean, you can still add filters, but just not heavy. Just don't go too heavy on it. You need it a little bit more real. Yeah,
and Paul,
I mean, that's trend we noticed.
If any of our listeners out there or myself were thinking about organising our next photo shoot, apart from calling you first,
Of course.
what else might we want to be thinking about in terms of, we've talked about it a bit already, haven't we, in terms of planning, thinking about location, researching the business, the industry. Anything else we might want to be thinking about?
I think the number one thing I would say you want to, I mean, again, we have sort of talked around these things all the time, but you really want to be considering who your audience is. And so who the audience is and what's the goal? What is it you're trying to do with, if it's a campaign, for example, or it might just be we want to make our website look better because we want to appeal to whoever, I don't know, pick a market. Start there. What is it the ultimate thing you're trying to, who you're trying to attract, and then plan it backwards from there. Is this something we're going to, and for example, Dan was saying, like, how often do we need to change our pictures earlier on? I would certainly recommend, because it is very difficult to stop things looking old. It just is, because everything moves on, and humans are so sophisticated when it comes to visual impact. You can just tell, and there's not one particular thing. So I would say you're certainly looking to change every 3 to 5 years. But sorry, coming back to the question, yes, planning. And I always say that, doing a photo shoot, it's not an individual sport. It takes a village to produce a great shoot. It takes the client being properly engaged with it. It will take a certain amount of planning. I mean, some things are relatively simple, right, we want some staff headshots. There are certain things within that, such as you'll always, no matter how many times you remind people, a certain percentage of your staff are going to forget.
Yes,
they just do. It's always the way. I've never found one, if, for example, I'm going onto a site, into a situation where you need sort of a uniform, for example, I'll always say you need to make sure the uniform's clean, you need brand new kit, etc., etc. I can guarantee you they won't. Those are things, you can almost tell the ones where that's just not going to happen, and it happens frequently, despite constant reminders. So these things are important, that sort of planning aspect of it, but primarily, where is it you want to go? And then when you're sort of engaging with a photographer, talk to them, ask them for ideas, be honest with them about, if you've got a budget in mind, again, that's the constant battle, isn't it, in business, is, do I tell them what my budget is, or do I ask for the best price? Well, you can take a snap of a car on an iPhone and it costs you nothing, or you can get it done properly and it might cost you £50,000. The two are not the same thing. Yes, they are the same. They are a picture of the same car, but they're not the same thing. So therefore, often when you are thinking about, how you want to do this, it might be worth sort of thinking about a budget. Now that, again, that can be difficult because you might not be aware of how much things cost. And I get that too, but an open conversation is far better than one where it's just about the price,
what you're saying, do your research into the industry, get a quote from a few people in terms of have that conversation, get some ballpark figures, go away and then think about what you actually want.
Absolutely.
Think about, I often say to my clients, regularly say, do you have a marketing budget in your business? The number of small business owners that don't, but I would always encourage you to have a marketing budget for your business. Don't cut back on your marketing even when times are tough. You need to keep promoting yourself, but obviously not every small business owner is able to go and spend £50,000 on a photo shoot. I'm not saying that's what they cost, but it's...
God, absolutely. I'm not sure I've ever done one worth that much, to be honest, but it'd be lovely if anyone's out there wants to spend that kind of money. I'm always
equally, if anyone wants a business coach for that price as well, let me know.
Absolutely.
You and I will both happily fill the void.
Yeah, coming back to that question very briefly, though, again, at that stage where you're thinking about it, is thinking like, how, yes, look at your competition. Yes, look at where they're going, but also look at, what are the stories you can tell in your business? Do you do a lot of work? Do you do a lot of work with charities? If so, would you want to talk about it? Would it be helpful in winning new clients if you did? Because it might not. You know what I mean? What are alternatives of, how can we sort of create some great impact. Again, this is where when you start talking to a photographer, this is where they can start, shooting ideas around. You know what I mean? And very often some of the best ideas come from the most stupid suggestions. Because it just triggers a thought, and that you run it down the line, and suddenly you've come up with a great idea. So for example, I'll give you an example. We were doing a story about a crane operator, one of the swing arms and the construction companies, and they were, we'll get, I think his name was Bob actually, come down and we'll photograph him next to the crane or climbing up one of the ladders, whatever. And it was like, great. Or we could climb all the way to the top and photograph him in his cab overlooking Birmingham. And again, there's a lot of technical challenges with that because the cabs are not lit or well lit on the inside, because obviously they need to see out through the glass. They're a long way up. There's all sorts of challenges there, but again, we figured it out, we worked it out, and that was it made a great photograph and ran through numerous magazines and websites throughout their industry, and attracted a lot of attention to the projects that it was to do with. So again, it's that horrible phrase, isn't it? Think outside the box. But there are lots of ways of tackling your industry, and use a photographer, in my opinion, as a consultant as much as anything. Because they're often, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's worked in your sector a lot, because they'll know, they'll see what the trends are, they'll have ideas, they'll see we're looking at these things all the time because that's our job.
A question from Claire, Paul. I don't know if I've got time to answer very briefly, but she's asking, do you pay per image when in hiring a photographer, or do you pay for the time of taking the shoot? How does it work generally in the industry? Is there a general approach?
It depends on the photographer. There are various ways of doing this, and this is a constant battle in my industry. So again, it also depends on the way in which a photo shoot is being conducted. But let's talk about sort of on a base level. Here we're doing a small business. I don't know, some staff portraits, for example. The way I do it is we will give you a price for the time it will take to shoot it, and that will include a small amount of preparation, some of the post-production that we'll do to a base level, and a license to use those images for as long as you need. Again, I put a caveat on that. If you're photographing people, you don't want to be using them for more than 3 to 5 years, because things change, and fashions change, and it's really obvious. It does. Yeah, I'm sorry, it does. Yeah, people change, hairstyles change, so that's one way of doing it. There are photographers out there who would say, right, I've got one fee for the time and then another fee to license the images. Again, I have worked on that way. That tends to be more when you're talking images that are a little bit more unique and they're for a big, much wider audience. There are people in my industry who say that's the only way you should work. But again, for example, we were commissioned recently to shoot a lot of environmental shots, because I was talking about earlier about this trend towards environmental images, and the way I did that was because I knew how long it would take to get each shot, we actually charged them per image, because they were very difficult to get good ones off anyway.
It sounds clear, like, going back to what Paul was saying earlier on about, make a few phone calls, speak to a few photographers, and find a package or a way of working that works for you and for them with the right photographer.
Yeah, it is. It's a flexible thing, but primarily I would say you're talking more. Often I get asked, "What's a day rate?" Yes, and that's a very common thing. And what I say to people is, "Look, my rate is X," but again, then there's a production behind that. So again, if you want me just to rock up and be me, that's the price you pay. If, however, you need us to start doing a lot of other things on top of that, like, for example, we might, to create the thing that you want to photograph, we might need to hire, say, 15 lights. Obviously that's on top, plus the time to organize it. If you want us to organize models and do pre-model shoots, all this sort of thing, that comes on top. So it's unfortunately it's not quite as simple as what's your rate and that's it. It can be for basic shoots, but again, it depends on what you need. But yeah.
Great. I'm conscious we've got 5 minutes left. I've got one very quick question, Paul, from Chloe, and then we'll leave the questions there. Chloe's just saying, do you do photography courses? Do you train people to teach you how to use a camera?
I don't actually know.
Chloe, but I'm sure there are people out there.
Sorry, Chloe. I apologise. No, I keep being told I should do it, but
a project for one day. But there, Chloe, there will be.
It's a one-day project. Yeah.
There'll be people out there that are used to training and teaching, and there'll be classes out that you can book onto if you want to.
There's a lot of people out there. I can certainly, if Chloe wants to email you or whatever, I can certainly send some details of places she should go. Again, because it depends on the level you're at, or what. Yeah,
I was just about to say exactly the same thing, Paul. I mean, my other thought, Chloe, there may well be photography groups out there that you may benefit and get a lot of, great advice and guidance and camaraderie from as a starting point as well. So
absolutely,
do connect with myself or Paul, and we'll happily point you in the right direction. But Paul, just before we finish, we've got 4 minutes. If somebody is interested in sort of finding out more about your services and you, what's the best way to get in touch? Is it email?
The very best way is email. The screen, because obviously when I'm out on photo shoots, we're not picking up the phone, or when we're editing, if you're deep into an edit, literally everything else is turned off, just get the job done, because that's what we're being paid to do. So email is the very best way. Usually I'll email back and try and arrange a call time. This is something, Stephen, that listening to our coaching sessions, I need to get something on the website where people can book in time automatically.
Indeed.
That's on the to-do list. We'll get around to that at some point.
But emailing Paul, and what I'd also recommend, even if you're not looking for a photographer right now, I would thoroughly recommend just take 10 minutes over your lunch this week and visit paulpainter.co.uk and just have a look at some amazing images. I've only shown a selection of them today. Just the expression on that gentleman's face just paints 1,000, tells 1,000 words. And just some of the images, Paul, that you've got on your website are absolutely fantastic. I love the one of the people in the gym doing their workouts, etc. I would absolutely recommend, if you have time over one day this week, but perhaps having your ice cream on your lunch break, do visit paulpainter.co.uk. There is some great imagery on there. I've only shown you a very small selection.
I don't know if we can, but I don't know if we've got time. I did sort of do a little bit of, I've got a little bit of a selection of images I can show you, but I don't mind. I know we're probably running out of time, aren't we?
No, we're fine. If you want to just show a few, that'd be absolutely great. Yes.
How do I share? Do I hit the share screen button?
Hit the share screen button. Absolutely, Paul. Let's finish off by seeing some of your own images. You've been so good in telling us all about how you can use imagery. Just while Paul's doing that, the 3 things Paul's talked about is differentiating yourself from your competition visually. Talked also about so I've lost myself there. We also talked about showing your audience things that your audience are interested in, and also, as Paul is doing now, only show us your very best work. So Paul, let's finish by just seeing some of your images.
I just wanted to just very quickly, talk about staff portraits, for example. A portrait does not have to be a white background, boring shot. And again, but it has to tell your story. So a lot of these, obviously, I can't explain the sort of surroundings behind them, but this was an author for a book. Wasn't about chess though, but it had chess in it. This was a portrait of a lady who works for the National Trust, interior designer. Again, wanted to keep it nice and simple. But different from what you would normally see. Normally they show all the bits behind them, but I thought, let's keep it simple. Portraits, they don't have to be boring. You know what I mean? In industry, you've seen that one. Talking about, this was the shot of the crane driver.
Right. The BT.
So this was over Birmingham. So again, it wasn't the greatest day, but weather-wise, but he made it work. Again, this is, this was promoting a house building company. They build, what do you call it? Off-site buildings,
prefab.
Prefab, thank you. Again, this was part of a story you did for the same company where they were, different company, where this was their paint shop, where they're painting these containers that eventually becomes people's homes. Again, this was a part of the story that they now tell. Again, talk about the gym. Again, we're using lighting very cleverly here to bring out his best features, as I'm sure you can see, but as part of it, again, this is just another little inset into that gym. This is part of people who are fascinated by that world, they know what it is like to use the chalk to dry your hands before you do your lifting, that kind of thing.
But what I love about that photo in particular, Paul, one of my favorites, is the amount of movement and action you're showing in a still image. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And the other thing with this gym, funny enough, the characters, the people who ran it, they're so much fun. I wanted to show that. They wanted like a team shot. So we could have done a standard one, which we kind of did, but then we also did this. If that doesn't tell you what that team is like, I don't know what does. Do you know what I mean? I just thought that was great. Again, it doesn't have to all be about business. It might be, this was a jewelry company. It was like, jewelry for paparazzi. This is a shot that's a few years old, which I think is kind of worn relatively well. I'm not sure if that one's on my website actually anymore. I think that one I might have taken it off.
Spot it. Yeah.
But there you go. And again, you've got these guys they're promoting a singing business where they're like the waiters who start this sort of argument while you're having your dinner, and it's brilliant and hilarious and great singing as well. So again, we did all this kind of a series of funny shots for them to promote them. So it's not just about corporate work. You can expand it out. You can show a different side to things. But there you go. There's a few. Just
absolutely love it.
Randomly picked.
Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate you taking your time to come and join us today. I'll just finish off by putting your details back on the screen, so anybody listening, as I say, Paul has got some amazing images, amazing skill, and I would absolutely recommend, if you're thinking about getting professional photography into your business, as I say, Paul's talked about how you can differentiate yourself, think about what your audience is interested in, only show your best work, which is Paul's just been doing, but do make contact with Paul, because he'll help you to bring out the best of your business through great imagery and drive your business forwards. Paul, thank you so much for joining us this Lunch and Learn. It's been great having you with us and learning all about what goes on behind the lens and about you and your business and the journey you've been on. So thank you so much. Look forward to catching up with you again very soon. Hope you've done another Lunch and Learn. To all our listeners, we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday again at 12 o'clock for our next Lunch and Learn session. But for now, stay well, stay safe, and we will see you in a few days' time. Take care now. Thanks again, Paul.
Bye.